This was the city wall of the Roman city in 400. It was built in 427 AD, and the Roman street grid. These are the main streets, the central streets which intersected on the hill.
Okay.
Have you been up there?
No. But that's where the church is
That's
now.
where the cathedral. The old is not used anymore. This was the French monks called the White Fathers, Père Blanc, who established a presence in Carthage in the 19th century, middle of the 19th century. They built the cathedral. They had a big monastery up there, which is now, the monastery has been turned into the museum, the main museum of Carthage, but it's closed. It's been closed for 2 or 3 years. It's going to be closed for another 3 years.
Why is it closed?
It's closed, okay, basically, actually it was our team, the architect from our team, the museum designer from our team, redid all of their galleries. And then some director who came along 4 years ago had the bright idea that he was going to redo all the exhibits and make them update them and modernize them with all the high-tech stuff. Of course, they didn't have the money to do that, so the museum was closed. It was never reopened. Now they have money. Now they have money from the European Union. So it's supposed to start in September, but we'll see.
Where were the Carthaginians?
Okay, so the Roman city is built on top of the Punic city. So, and as you know from the history, so Carthage was founded in the 9th century BC by Phoenicians who came from what is now Lebanon. Tyre, mainly from Tyre and Sidon. They founded Carthage as a Phoenician outpost, a Phoenician colony. The heartland of the Phoenicians was there in Lebanon. Carthage was a very important overseas colony which became an empire. And
on its own.
it became an empire on its own, the Punic Carthage, which was, and then Carthage then took control of much of North Africa was under the control of Carthage. But they were rivals of Rome. And there were constant battles.
What years were those battles?
Okay, so the battle started, I would say, in the 500s BC, and then there were the 3 Punic Wars, which you've heard of. The first Punic War was around 260, which Rome kind of won, but it wasn't decisive. The second Punic War was when Hannibal, who marched from North Africa through Spain, through the south of France, into Italy. And we have the battles in Italy, Trasimene, there were several, Trebia, there were several battles where Carthage tried to defeat Rome on its own soil, which that also kind of ended in a stalemate. And although Hannibal left, Carthage did not succeed in conquering Italy. Then the Third Punic War, which was in 146 BC, Rome came with a massive fleet and landed, and they house to house, street to street fighting, all the way from the harbours up the hills, and they won. So the Romans won the Third Punic War. They then levelled the city of Carthage. It was completely flattened. No buildings were left standing.
Wow.
And the site was cursed, and the site was left abandoned for about 100 years before Augustus, who was the first emperor, rebuilt a new city, this city, on top of the old Punic site, and that then became the capital of Roman North Africa. From about 40 BC up until 439 AD, just before you were born. 439 AD, then the Vandals, which is one of the Germanic tribes who came out of Germany, through France, through Spain, across to Morocco, came all the way along the North African coast. They conquered Roman Carthage. And so Carthage became the Vandal capital for about 100 years, from 439. So this wall was actually built just before that in
Was Constantine alive then?
So Constantine was, he was a Roman emperor from 312 until 337. So Carthage was a Roman city under Constantine.
So did Carthage at one point become Christian?
Yes. So when Christianity took hold in Rome after the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, which is when he saw the vision in the sky, Constantine converted to be Christian, and a lot of the upper class, well, a lot of the people who were close to Constantine or wanted to be part of the government, they became Christian, but there was still in Rome, there was still a big pagan component through the 4th century and into the early 5th century. When the Vandals came here, they had their own sect. It was a Christian sect that was not Catholic, Donatist. It was a different branch, if you like, of Christianity, different Christological beliefs.
Not under the Pope.
They were not under the Pope. No, that's right. And they then, so under the Vandals, Carthage became completely Christian. Everybody was by default. Everybody by default was Christian because that's what.
But not Roman Catholic.
No, not Roman Catholic.
Oh.
And then in 533, Justinian, who was the emperor in Constantinople, because by then the Roman Empire had split into the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. The Western Roman Empire was weak because the Vandals were attacking and the tribes were invading from Spain and from the north. So they had constant troubles on their frontiers. But the Eastern Roman Empire was doing very well at with Constantinople, Istanbul as the capital. And then Justinian when he became emperor in 527, he then put together a massive fleet under Belisarius, the general Belisarius, and they came and had a massive battle off the coast here, and they defeated the Vandals.
Oh, so the Eastern Roman Empire then defeats the Vandals,
Yes.
while the Western Roman Empire is somehow weakened
Yes.
as a result of constant attacks by the Goths and the Visigoths.
Was it at that time then Rome was pretty much had fallen? The empire.
Shrunk?
The Western Roman Empire had shrunk, and eventually they were actually the Byzantine Empire, which was, they was kind of cousins. They were like cousins. They were not enemies. The Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire still had a lot in common, and in fact then Justinian also built many churches in Italy, especially in Ravenna, Aquileia, Milan, and so there were a lot of Eastern craftsmen coming to Rome, and Rome remained a Christian city, and the Pope, of course, the Pope was there. So, but the Eastern Roman Empire was stronger. So the Eastern Roman Empire came, and Justinian made Carthage his capital for North Africa, and Carthage then was a Byzantine city from 533, 534 up to 698. So starting around 650, the Muslim invaders were making their way out of Iraq, Iran, coming down through Egypt, all along the north coast of North Africa. Eventually they arrived in Tunisia in the middle of the 7th century, and people were fleeing the countryside and coming into Carthage for refuge because of the walls which protected it. But Carthage was then under attack. The economy was declining. Lots of refugees coming in, and so Carthage declined, and then eventually Carthage fell to the Muslims in 698.
Were the walls quite impressive?
The walls are very impressive, and they've been excavated at several spots. Yes, the British team and actually our team, the Canadian team, have all excavated parts of the walls. The problem at Carthage is that with every civilization that arrives, they destroy what was there before. So and then when the walls are not impressive like the walls that you see here. You can see here, you really only see the lower parts. They're not preserved like the walls of Rome, which are preserved, they're full height in places. And so when the Muslim invaders came, they destroyed the whole city again so that only foundations were left.
Same thing the Romans did, huh?
That's right. Same things that the Romans did to the Punic, to the Phoenician culture.
Wow.
But in that case, the Muslims did not make Carthage their new capital. They made Tunis and Kairouan, which is in the interior. There are many very early mosques from the 8th, 7th, 8th century in Kairouan. So those two cities became the most important cities for the Muslims. And Carthage was abandoned and just reverted to agriculture. After all the stone was robbed, they destroyed it, then the stone was taken away to be reused in buildings in Tunis and La Villette, and then Carthage just reverted to agriculture. And we have pictures of the whole site of Carthage even from the 1925, where there are hardly any houses, hardly any buildings at all. It was still all fields.
What's the distance from here to here?
Okay, so that's
two rows that crossed in the middle.
That's right. These are the main roads. These are the main roads, and then there's a whole grid of streets,
So where can I ask you, just when you find fragments of Roman history,
Yes.
are you how is it like layers where they destroy one civilization, but they left enough of a sort of layer that you can find things, or
so the floors were not normally survived because the floors were not of use for rebuilding. The walls have gone. So as you dig down, you will find a sequence of floors.
That's interesting. So a series of floors. So the Byzantine Romans.
Byzantine is the latest at the top, just below the modern ground surface. You immediately come to Byzantine levels.
Wow.
And in fact, in places, because this field was ploughed for many years, centuries, the ploughing had destroyed a lot of the latest levels. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when we start digging, you'll come right down onto Roman levels. There won't be any Byzantine left at all because of the agriculture.
What's the distance across?
So I'd say that from here to here, I'd say is probably 3 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what was the population at its peak?
Probably 200. Well, at least 250,000.
Large.
What year was that?
That would have been in the Roman period, probably both in the 2nd century and again in the 4th century.
When did Rome fall? When was Rome, Roman Empire?
I think people say, I think there's a date of like 480 AD, which is said to be the date for the fall of Rome, but it's not really a hard and fast date.
It's a slow progression down.
Yes,
Okay.
it's not really a hard and fast date.
So when you did the Vandals, the Germanic people that came in between, did they do any building?
Yes, they did.
So okay, do you find their?
Oh yes. So we find a lot of we find there was a church. Well, there were 2 churches. The Tunisians excavated it. So they found the foundations of this church here, which had an apse at each end. This is a reconstruction, 3D reconstruction. This was the Byzantine Cathedral of Carthage, which is in this field. And underneath that, beneath the floors of this, by about 6 feet lower, there was a Vandal church.
Really?
Yes.
Did the Vandals have the same sort of distinctive architecture,
Well,
or?
they were copying a lot of Roman architecture.
Okay.
Yes. And there's also Vandal architecture in Spain. So they were copying the Roman architecture.
Because I mean, whenever I sort of hear about the Vandals, or I always think of them as sort of Germanic tribes that didn't
Have
have
no
much
interest in culture, that's not true.
Okay.
They were strongly Christian, but it was they were ruled by kings. They were ruled by